Since we have a really small family group here and not full, we'll talk a little differently than we would for a big group. But you've already gone through how to build the planter and what kind of soil to put into it. And once you get to that point, this would be really the next thing that we need to start talking about. So, when you're putting together this garden, whether it's a community garden or whether it's the homeowner or the apartment dweller that has space to put together some kind of a vegetable garden in a plot, raised bed, the first thing everybody really has to do is put some kind of plan together. Get some graph paper out. You don't have to be a great artist. You can just draw circles in there to the right size, label them, what kind of vegetable it's going to be, so that you get kind of a feel of what that planter is going to look like when it's full. And you should put the dates that things should be planted on there and things like that, so that you've got a history. As we go through this, you'll see why some of that is important. And I know you probably already talked about some of this, but to be successful, you need to have a lot of sun, you need to have access to water, which is very, very important. You have to have enough space. You don't necessarily have to have acres to put this in. As you've seen, you can do it in a 4x8 section, and then some of the homeowners don't even have that kind of space. There's always containers that they can grow things in. Okay, what we're going to talk about today first is selecting the vegetables, and it's really a very simple thing. People should plant what they like. They'll eat what they like, and it's much easier for them to get involved and enthusiastic about it if what they're putting in there is what they like to grow. You need to also think about, in selecting plants, the production that you'll get from those plants. I mean, if you have a type of vegetable that's only going to give you one thing for the entire season, then that's not something that you want to plant. When you plant something like a carrot, they grow quickly and they grow in small spaces, so you can plant a lot of them, even though you only get one carrot per plant. You need to think about disease-resistant varieties, because that's an important factor for the homeowner, especially who doesn't have a lot of experience in growing vegetables. And then, if you're like me, you like to have lots of colors in there, so you can get colorful leaves and colorful stalks, things that look pretty, and kind of jazz up your life a little bit that way. When we're talking about planting, there's 2 seasons in California, and in California we're kind of lucky because they extend a lot longer than just the short seasons that you might have back east. But when we talk about warm season vegetables, and my understanding is the program is going to basically start in early 2012, so you're going to be starting out training people with warm season vegetables, which you're going to start planting in February, March, April, either from transplants or you're going to plant seeds. So warm season vegetables are the things that you see across the top there. Tomatoes, peppers, corn, beans, zucchinis, all those things like the warm weather to grow and to produce fruit. And this is what you get. A lot of color in some of these, also a lot of good produce. Now the university has tested over the years a lot of different varieties. These are just a few of the recommended varieties that we would suggest during the summer season. These are all disease-resistant types. Now there's hundreds more of every single one of those varieties that people can choose from. There's no right or wrong. It's just that we found these to be pretty much disease-resistant, which is one of the things that you're concerned about. Then the cool season is what we're in right now. So we would already have been planting broccoli, lettuce, cabbages, kales, carrots, all these peas, all these things we'd be planting now because they like cooler weather to mature and produce and not bolt. For example, if you plant lettuce in the summer months, it quickly bolts, which is going to seed, and so you get no production whatsoever from the plants. The nice thing about the cool season vegetables for the consumer is basically there's more food value, more food coming from that individual plant than you would get from a summer season plant, a warm season plant. So you get, in the space that you're growing a tomato, and you get quite a bit of production from a tomato or pepper, but in that same space, you'll get more production from the cool season vegetables. So it's a bigger payoff for the end user. And this is what your cool season vegetables are going to look like. And once again, recommended varieties. So these are all disease resistant, and once again, there's hundreds of other named vegetables types in each one of those categories. And then there's the heirlooms in both seasons that you can look at. But once again, over the years, UC has found that these are pretty much disease resistant, so the kinds that you want to use. I've got a handout here. And basically, in Southern California, we're very, very fortunate in that we have long season. And the very dark green sections in those are the best time to either plant seeds or plant transplants of those particular varieties. The lighter green area is where you can still plant seeds or you can still plant transplants, but it's not quite as good as the dark green. And of course the white areas, you're not going to want to do any plants at all. So what you can see is something like beets here, and what do we got here? Carrots, radishes. Some of these you can plant all year long and get production from them. Others, if you look at okra, you look at jicama, you look at eggplant, they're only going to be producing right in the center, which would be all of your warm season crops. So there's a broad range of months that people can plant things in their particular.
So my tomatoes are going to die.
Pardon?
I have tomatoes. I won't be able to eat tomatoes.
Tomatoes are getting pretty much out now.
With the weather last night, I think they die.
But you know, there are tomato varieties now that are almost cold season varieties that you can start from seed now, or if you can find them in the nursery, you can plant now, and they'll grow and they'll start producing like February, in the winter months, so to speak. They're generally Russian hybrids from Siberia and places like that, but they are coming more and more to be a year-round thing. But at the moment, and for a home gardener, for the people that we're trying to reach, stick with the real basics and don't get too carried away. For your own personal use, it's a good experiment, something to do. A real short history of seeds. The very first plants were spores. That's ferns. So if you have a fern and you see that little brown, kind of fuzzy little thing on the underside of the leaf, that's spores. That's how the plant kingdom developed millions of years ago, from spores, from ferns. The next step up were the evergreen trees. As things evolved, evergreens became more prominent in the landscape. And those are all propagated by soft-coated seeds. So if you think a pinon seed, a pinon nut, it doesn't have a hard shell on it. And almost all of your pines that are cone-bearing, they have seeds, and they pop open when they're ripe, but they don't have any coating. So they landed and grew. Then about 100 million years ago, the flowering plants came into existence, and they all have hard coatings. And one of the purposes in evolution for that was simply the fact that birds would eat them, take them somewhere, and deposit. So the plant now is able to migrate great distances as opposed to just dropping and growing right where the mother tree was. So that's what we have today, and that's what we're using for all of our plants, are hard-coated seeds from flowering plants. In your community garden and in talking to your clients or your customers, whatever you want to call them, there's two things that they can plant. They can either plant seed or they can plant transplants. in a community garden that's in a park or a public place, it's probably easiest to think about planting from a transplant. For somebody in a home, in an apartment that has a small little plot, it might be better that they plant from seed. And one of the values from seed is they're much more economical. You know, you can get seed packets. They're going to have 25, 30, 200, depending on the variety of seeds in here, for about $3, $2.79 for this one, and it's got probably 30 tomato seeds in here. So the seed for somebody doing their own personal planting is a much cheaper, more economical way, and they certainly get a lot more plants than they would if they were going to the nursery and buying, you know, 6-plant transplants, and these are going to run probably $3, and you've only got 6 plants. So basically, they're economical. The second thing is that you're going to find more variety. Did you have a question?
Is there a particular place where you recommend to buy seeds? 'Cause I mean, visiting some of the Home Depots and Lowe's and looking for shallots and garlic, I haven't been able to find it.
You can't find it? I'm coming up to that after this slide. That's a good question. And that's another reason why you need to get this information out to the people that are doing their home gardens. So you get they're more economical, you get a greater variety, you can find all different kinds of tomatoes, all different kinds of lettuce, things that you won't normally find if you're just going out and buying a 6-pack at a nursery or a big box store. The information that you need is on the packet. Unfortunately, in our community, I think I've not seen any seed packets in Spanish. Somebody here may be able to tell me if there are, but almost all of these are in English. Are there some Spanish?
There's a few, but they're bilingual.
Okay. So that's important for your end user. Are they bilingual or are they strictly Hispanic-speaking people? So most of the seeds that you're going to see are aimed at to me, as opposed to the people that you're working with. All right, you'd asked about where seeds. For a lot of people that are doing a lot of gardening, one of the biggest sources is seed catalogs. And there's no one good seed catalog out there. I've got hundreds of them. They've all got all kinds of information in them. Some of it's very, very good. Some of it's very sketchy. But all of these will have all the different seeds that you're looking for. You can find the catalogs online if the people are proficient in that, or you can order the catalog and get a hard copy like this. The other thing you can do is you can find good seeds at retail nurseries. You're not going to necessarily find the seeds that you want at a big box store. So what you're going to look for is something like this. This is Botanical Interests, I think is the name of this seed company. And they're down at Rogers Garden, that's where that picture was from. But basically, if you go to a good nursery as opposed to a big box, you will find much more selection. Now, if you're talking about garlic seed or shallot seed or even the bulbs themselves, this is probably, a catalog is probably going to be the best source for that. I have not seen, except maybe at Rogers, garlic cloves that you can plant to grow.
Question, Tom. If a seed has been prepared, let's say in Kansas or someplace, can I use it here without problem, or have to be California better?
Okay, the seed companies are scattered around the country. The very good seed companies will have trial fields in several parts of the country, so they may say they're Pennsylvania, but they could easily have a field that they try seeds in Kansas, and they may have one in California or Oregon. The other thing is that most seed companies don't grow all the seed that they sell. they're buying seed in bulk from seed farmers, or basically growing plants for seed. And they could be anywhere in the country and sometimes anywhere in the world. I've seen packages like this that will have carrots or whatever it is, and if you look close it says product of Denmark or something like that. And generally, you're always best if you get seeds that are closer to your market where you're living and working. But also, most seeds will germinate. What's going to happen is that the variety might not be quite as good for your climate as another climate, especially if it's bred for cold season, like we were talking about the Russian tomato hybrids that are coming into the market. They're grown or developed for very, very cold climates. Doesn't mean they won't work here, but they work best, you know, along that particular area.
And I don't know if you're going to address this later, but is it best to start the seed actually in the soil or in another? Okay,
That's
thank you.
okay.
And then indoors or outdoors, and
So anyhow, you can find seeds this way. You can find seeds on the internet. You can find good seeds at good nurseries where you've got people that are proficient in growing things, and they can help you there. Now, a good seed packet will have 4 things on it. It'll give you the amount of days it takes to germinate. It'll tell you how far to space the seeds apart when you're planting them. It'll tell you what depth to plant them to. It'll tell you what time to plant. In other words, this particular one gives you a range of months when it's best to plant the seeds. But you've got your charts there also that also tell you what's the best months to plant. And then there will always be on the back of one of these little seed containers, this one says packed for 2011, which means that it's good for that particular season. They guarantee germination if it's planted in the year 2011. Now, seeds will keep anywhere from 1 to about 5 to 6 years, depending on the kind of seed it is and how well it is stored. So once somebody uses a few of these seeds, seal up the packet, put it inside another envelope, keep it in a cool, dry spot, and seeds will last for several years so that you don't have to just use 1 or 2 and throw the packet away. In a community garden, what's really nice about using seeds, if they can do them outside of the little 4x8, is that enough people can use these for the garden and for other gardens, and so they can probably use a lot of them up in 1 year.
Question, when I plant, I make the hole to plant the seed, should I put just 1 seed or a bunch of them?
Some people like to plant several because that way they're sure something will come up, and then you just snip off the other ones. Some people like to only plant 1 in a row or in a hill. So it really doesn't matter, but it's just kind of what you like to do. And some seeds, like lettuce, when you buy a package of seeds, there's 300 seeds in there. And lettuce has a shorter lifetime on the shelf than some other seeds. So I would probably plant a couple of lettuce seeds in the spot that I'm planting it in. And if they come up, then I just cut out the other ones. Never pull them out, you'll disturb the roots, but just cut off. Now, I know you talked about the planting mix for your planters, the soil that has to be done. It's a little bit different for seeds. If you're going to start your seeds in the ground, you've already got your soil there. If you're going to start them in, something like this, or a couple other things I'll show you, then you're going to need to create a special mix for the seeds. Now, this particular mix is a University of California recommended. It's a soilless mix, so you don't get all the diseases that would be available if you dug a couple of shovelfuls out of the ground and were putting them into something like this. And basically, it's peat moss, vermiculite, and perlite, which are both very light volcanic type products, and then some fertilizer in there. So you can make these. And this is what you'll get. It's just just a mix, just exactly like it says there. And the only problem with this for the community gardens that might be out there in the park that you're controlling, you need to buy these things in big bags in bulk, and then the question is, where do we store it? And that's the same problem for a homeowner or especially for an apartment dweller. Making this out of bulk product, you've got remnants that you're going to have to store until the next time you need to make it. So there are companies out there that make soilless seed mixes so that you can buy those in smaller bags, and that would probably be enough for most homeowners that are just growing an occasional seed. There's other kinds of mixes that are just as good. There's no right way to make these. You can look at these, you can use vermiculite, and that's what that is. It's just a puffy kind of a mica, and you can grow your seeds in that and get your plants started. A couple of tips for people that are starting seeds. Most vegetable seeds are not these big, hard seeds that you need to chip or nick or file away to get the outer coating off so the water gets in. So that's not really so much for vegetables. But there are a lot of vegetables that need to be soaked in warm or hot water overnight. Parsley is a good example of that. Peas. All these things benefit by soaking in water and then planting them. And another thing that you can do for seeds, if that's how you're going with your vegetables, is what we call sprouting them on moist paper towels. You get a paper towel, you get it damp, you lay your seeds in there, you roll up the towel, put it in a baggie like you're seeing there, a little plastic baggie, label the baggie so you know exactly what you're growing. Check it every day, open up the towel. As soon as they're sprouted, you can see here the little root coming out. As soon as you see that, take it off the towel and plant it in a soilless mix, and you've increased the generation of the plants. And then you can actually see then which ones are growing, which ones aren't. You can throw away the dead seeds. These are just a few of the things that you want to make sure that you do for your seed if that's how you're growing your vegetable transplants. And basically, when you grow a seed, these were planted on the 23rd of October. So basically, when you're planting a seed in something like this, all you're really doing is creating a big transplant like I've got up there on the top. Now, this is starting to show its true leaf, and probably when that leaf gets a little bit bigger, this is immediately going to go into the ground. It doesn't have to be as big as this. So, that was kept moist all the time so that the seed would absorb water from the soil. We kept it warm, and those are the temperatures, and when this was started, the temperatures were about that in the daytime. In the nighttime, they were that way. Now, you're going to tend to start growing your seeds more indoors. Keep them in a kitchen window, somewhere where there's some light. A lot of people grow them in the garage with heating mats underneath and with fluorescent lights. Not a good way for the people that we're trying to get to. But basically, they can grow it in the windowsill of a kitchen, especially where they've got some light, where the room's going to be warm. This is just an example of a system that I use sometimes. Start out with these pellets. The pellets get soaked. They look like that. You plant a seed in them. And then the regular germination time, these were all tomatoes this year, so they all sprouted. By the time they get that big, I generally move them into these. I'll recycle these from for years. And so they'll grow a little bit bigger into this because they're tomatoes. You handle them differently. But once they get to a size that looks like it's going to be reasonable, they can go out into the ground. So, you can plant seeds, to your question, you can plant them directly into the ground, and almost all of these will say plant directly into the ground. or you can plant them like I do in little pots to get them to grow stronger first. The reason that I like that, and it's good for a homeowner, is that they can now put them where they really want them. Sometimes when you plant seeds in the ground, you'll get spaces that are spotty so that you have to replant the seeds. Also, I have found that if I do something like this here, I have a raised bed garden at the Great Park, which would be similar to a community garden. And if you try to plant seeds in a community garden, what you find is that watering isn't as consistent. You can't be there every day, or any kind of things can happen and the seeds don't germinate. Now there's some seeds that you should put into the ground first. All of your roots, carrots, radishes, beets, turnips, all those kinds of things should go into the ground as opposed to into something like that. But I have found if I make a little paper pot, and you can do this with newspaper and a jelly jar, or as you can see there, there's a special device that you can use, and you just wrap the paper around that, close it up at the bottom, fill it full of potting mix. I have successfully planted beets, radishes in this. They germinate, and then this immediately goes into the community garden. Fold down the paper so that it doesn't stand above the ground. And now you've got good germination on root crops in a community garden. So this is just another thought. But you can plant them straight into the ground, or you can plant anything into a container first and then into the ground. These are just some examples of some recycled containers. Those are empty salsa jars. You poke holes in the bottom. Those are the paper things I like to make. Styrofoam coffee cups. You can buy things to grow seeds in. We're not looking to do that with the gardens that we're talking about, but that's another way things can be done. There's just a few more examples, all kinds of peat pots in there, and recycled your plastic. If we're concerned about expense, and I think that we probably are in what your goal is, then we want to try to do stuff that's as inexpensive as possible. Paper is really inexpensive. Everybody gets a newspaper, and you can make those things very, very easy. Pardon?
Egg gardens.
Egg cartons, yes. Paper milk cartons, you cut off the top, or half and half, small carton. All those things can be recycled, and that makes it easy for the community to do without having to go out and spend, dollars and dollars on stuff that they can buy. I mean, you can buy everything, or you can make things. So these were all grown from seed. It's jicama, tomatillo, epazote. All of these seeds you can find even in a English catalog. They're available, and more are becoming available here. If you can find a catalog that's strictly aimed at Hispanic and is in that language, is in Spanish, I think you're going to probably find more specialty seeds that you can put into your garden. And that's important with the people that we're going to be dealing with. I mean, they're not all into the things that grow in an English garden. They're used to the things in their home country. So you can find those seeds, but you'll never ever find these plants like this in a nursery. They just won't exist because there's not enough demand. But that way they can satisfy their own particular needs or something like that. Another thing that I like to tell people to do is that even if you have a community garden or a planter box, if you can find some space in your landscape, some of these plants are very attractive and will look good if you mix them in with your plants. But the key thing there is you have to be careful with your pesticides that you use. You don't want to spray pesticide, and we'll get to cover that before we're done here too. So, if you're doing with seeds, there's a lot of advantages. If you're dealing with transplants, the downside of transplants, and you'll see, this is little yet, but you're going to see transplants that will come in a 4-inch pot like this, and it'll be very, very expensive. And it's not something that the people that we're going to be working with are going to be able to do. But the beauty of a transplant is that you can just pop this out with your finger. You've got some good sturdy growth, it's got some good roots on it, and you can plant it into the ground, and it'll start, you've already got a couple of months head start from a seed on it. The downside is that they're certainly a lot more expensive than seeds. They're easier to handle for some people than seeds. Some people get intimidated by seeds, and so they think they can't do it, but a seed just wants to grow. That's all it wants to do. So if you put it in the ground and keep it moist, if it's viable, it will pop out of the ground no matter what you do. Now, if you do buy transplants, when you push them out, you'll see all kinds of roots generally around the edges. You don't want to see a lot of root because that just means it's root bound. But what you want to do is to open it, work it a little bit with your fingers and pull things out so that it's not in this tight little ball. And you put it into the ground. You don't want it to be planted any deeper than the level it is here in the pot. And you can plant these successively. If you don't want to plant all 6 of these today, you can wait a week, plant another 6. And so you can spread things out. But great for using in a community garden. That's what I would recommend if you're trying to build a garden in a park or a library or whatever it is, would be to use transplants. One thing that fertilizer does is generate new growth. And when we get into the bugs part of this, that's exactly what the bugs are looking for, is this beautiful new soft growth, and they just go right to it. So if you're fertilizing now, you're going to find you're going to get a lot more insects coming to your plants and destroying them. Just a couple of rules. If you're doing seedlings, you want to fertilize them when they get to be about 2 inches tall. So these are not quite big enough yet, but these should be fertilized. These are big enough to start fertilizing. And then every 6 weeks after that. When you put them in the ground, then you want to fertilize them every 6 weeks. Now you can use any of the kinds of fertilizers I'm going to talk about. They can be solid, they can be liquid. So if you're looking at fertilizers, one of the things you want to look at, and unfortunately this picture, this fertilizer is aimed more at turf, at grasses. All of our soils in Southern California are deficient in nitrogen. That's the one thing that we know that they're deficient in most of the time. So if you look at the nitrogen number, and you've got your N, your P, and your K, it's a very high number. And that's really meant to have nice, beautiful green lawns. When you're working with fertilizers for vegetables or shrubs, I would really recommend something that would say 10, 6, 10. That's the percentages of those nutrients that are in the fertilizer. So your fertilizers are always going to have an NPK. The numbers are going to vary by the brand name or the type. Try to go lower is better as far as all of the numbers on that kind of thing. You don't want to burn your plants. All the fertilizers generally add some small quantities of micronutrients, maybe a little sulfur, maybe a little calcium, magnesium. All these things are added just in very dilute amounts so that the nutrients don't get overwhelming into the soil. And the other thing is follow the label instructions. So once again, we're doing a better job in the market with both bilingual packaging here, so there are directions bilingual in most of the fertilizers that you're going to buy. So this is what you're going to see out there, and the pluses and the minuses. And as I said earlier, there's no good fertilizer, there's no bad fertilizer. You just need to, and your people need to know what's pro and what's con in all of these things. The positive of the chemical type fertilizer is you know exactly what the composition is, and it's very simple to use, and it's also relatively inexpensive in the marketplace. The negatives are all things that people are becoming more and more concerned with. The use of petroleum to make these, to deliver it, greater potential for pollution, especially if people are over-fertilizing. So those are pluses and minuses if you're using a chemical fertilizer. If you're using an organic fertilizer, and I've kind of talked about a number of them here down at the bottom, manures, blood meal, cottonseed meal, seaweed, fish, alfalfa, all these things are organic fertilizers that basically give you all of the pros and all of the cons again. For an apartment dweller and so forth, some of these negatives are really important to them. It's going to be harder to store. These are bulkier. You usually have to buy them in big bags or big quantities. But the good part of these is that they release their nutrients very slowly in the soil, so they're not going to burn your plants. They're not going to harm the soil. They're basically feeding the soil first, and then the soil is built up and got better, and then the roots suck the nutrients out of that soil. Now, this is a kind of a chart from the least to the most of the actions that people can take in the community and in their homes. Prevention, which is simply stopping it from happening in the first place. Cultural, which is basically planting the right kind of plant material. Mechanical, that's the person themselves going out there and plucking the bad thing off of the plant, squishing it, squirting it, squashing it. There's biological, which is a little bit harder for the homeowner to do, but every bad bug has a good bug that wants to eat it. And that's what biological control is. And sometimes the university releases bugs because the bad bugs get out of control. A number of years ago, the University of California released specific wasps that attacked the Mexican whitefly, which the population in Orange County was just growing like crazy. And of course there's a relationship between the good bugs and the bad bugs. The good bugs eat the bad bugs, but they won't eat all of them, because if they ate all of them, there wouldn't be any food for them, because they're really specific, and the good bugs die. So there's bad bugs get up, and the good bugs get stronger, and the bad bugs go down, and they just go back and forth. So there's always going to be some bugs in the environment, but you don't want to worry about it. There's good bugs out there. Now, homeowners can buy some good bugs. I mean, you'll go to a nursery and you'll see lady beetles, you'll see praying mantis, you'll see lacewings. All these things are available, but I don't know whether it's going to be of interest to the community at large that we're trying to work with.